an absolutely insane day in the world of Magic the Gathering. Wizards of the Coast has released more bloomburrow spoilers, and the cards are absolutely bonkers. Wizards has said, you know what? Forget power creep. Let's full on power run, baby. You gotta see this stuff to believe it.
Magic. I am a wizard. History. I'm an old wizard. The magic historian. My bones hurt.
Greetings! Owners of fine luxury cardboard rectangles, my friends. I hope the day finds you well because we have gathered for a cram-packed installment of Mega Magic Spoilers. Bloomburrow is my favorite set of the year. I absolutely love the flavor. I love a bunch of the concepts of the cards. I have to admit, Wizards has definitely lost their mind. The power of the cards that we're going to look at today, some of them are so incredibly broken. Now, because I was sick recently, haven't been able to keep up with the spoiler videos, so we're going to be talking about a ton of cards in this video, but there's going to be a bunch of extra cards that I'm going to cover in a live stream tonight over on my live stream channel. So come by and check that out. And if you haven't seen it yet, the bloomburrow story is out on my Fantasy Geographic lore channel, so you can learn all of the details about what happened in bloomburrow, because a number of the cards we're going to look at today do feature in the story. Now that that's out of the way, let's go look at some broken craziness. We're starting off with an absolutely bonkers mythic. Take a look at Dragonhawk, Fate's Tempest. This is actually part of the bloomburrow story, this creature showing up, this insane bird dragon. Its power level is ridiculous. 2 red and 3 for a 5/5 flyer. When it enters or attacks, exile the top X cards of your library, where X is the number of creatures you control with power 4 or greater. You may play those cards until your next end step. At the beginning of your next end step, Dragonhawk deals 2 damage to each opponent for each of those cards that are still exiled. Why not tack on the fact that in Commander, it'll smack all of your opponents, right? It's not target opponent, it's everybody. This is wild. It gives you a bunch of card advantage. And one of the big downsides of the cards that let you exile stuff off the top of your deck is when you can't really utilize them. But the Dragonhawk says, don't even worry about it, son. I'll smack them even if you don't play the cards. So this is just absolutely nuts to me. Dragon players are going to love to combine this with other dragons where, yo, I've already got a bunch of creatures with big beefy power. Every time you swing, you're going to get at least 1 card off the top of your deck that you can play. And if for some reason you end up exiling a bunch of lands, well, guess what? No biggie. It's just going to smack your opponent for every single one. Take 2 for every land I exiled, chump. Like, this is nuts. The power creep in Magic is very, very real, right? Now, this features in the bloomburrow story, and originally it seemed like it might have been the dragon Colahan who was brought over into bloomburrow somehow by being traveling through an omen path, something like that. It's not 100% clear what this is supposed to be now, though, as it's literally given its own name, Dragonhawk Fate's Tempest, which makes it feel like it's its own individual creature, and this is the first time we're seeing it. So who knows what Dragonhawk looks like on another plane. Maybe Wizards will reveal later on that Dragonhawk was just the name of what they called it on bloomburrow, and it actually is Colahan, because we are going to be going back to Tarkir, and this might be a way for them to tie it in. I do love the concept of a bird dragon. He's got the 4 wings that are like a hawk's wings, but at the tips, it's got dragon wing tips, and he breathes lightning and can summon storms. Like I said, he shows up in the bloomburrow story. So if you want to know more about that, I have the whole story available in lore videos over on my Fantasy Geographic channel, so you can check that out. Now, let's move on. We got more to talk about. Hearthborn Battler. 1 red and 2 for a 2/3 lizard warlock with haste. Whenever a player casts their second spell each turn, Hearthborn Battler deals 2 damage to target opponent. So Wizards is stepping it up in terms of the play 2 card concept. If you've been playing on Arena, you'll know they just changed over the beginner deck set where they have 10 different decks that you can play with, and one of them is a red-blue deck that cares about you casting your second spell every turn. And for a while there, the cards that say, yo, you gotta cast 2 spells to get this benefit, there wasn't really enough of them to reach critical mass. But we've reached the point now where there absolutely is. And this steps it up another level because it doesn't just care about you casting 2 spells in a turn, it cares about anybody casting 2 spells in a turn. So you can just rush your cards out, and if your opponent tries to rush their cards out to match what you're doing, boom, this guy's just going to make them pay. Oh, you played 2 cards? Great. Take one in the chop, son. Right? So the artwork shows a goofy looking lizard with a weird little headdress. The lizards actually have some really cool lore. We went over it in the Planeswalker's Guide to Bloomburrow, which I did over on my live stream channel talking about all that. But they have cool rites of passage. The lizard folk are pretty funky overall. It looks like he's literally whipping bones with fire and lightning magic. So I'm not 100% sure what's going on in this artwork, but I'm 100% sure I wouldn't want it happening to me. Moving on, we've got For the Common Good. Green is my favorite color. 1 green and double X for a sorcery that says, create X tokens that are copies of target token you control. Then tokens you control gain indestructible until your next turn. You gain 1 life for each token you control. So this feels like something you do have to do a little more build up for, right? You're going to want to have, in most cases, like some kind of special token that's better than just a 1/1, because paying double X, like if you just make X1, the spell's going to cost 3 mana and it's going to make 1 copy of a 1/1. That's pretty underwhelming, but there are a lot of bonkers tokens now, especially considering they just introduced the offspring mechanic, right? So with that, you can make copies of the children that actually have a bunch of abilities, and that's where it can ramp up. And playing green, you can also have a ton of mana. So if you do and can just go ham with this, you can swing in with all your little donks because they have indestructible. Like, you could literally just pay this for 1 green and gain life equal to the number of tokens you have out and make them indestructible until end of turn, which is all right. Not amazing, but it's all right. The flavor text says, despite their differences, every creature and culture of Valley stood in unison against the threat. It does make it feel from the flavor text like this should affect all of your creatures and not just token creatures. But I do love the artwork where you have this squirrel who's kind of in the forefront, but then all around him you can see the different animals. You can see that there are the birds, you can see little raccoon folk, frogs. The more you look at it, the more you can see insanity going on. It looks almost like they're moving into outer space. When I look at the artwork, it's not 100% what's going on. It's like nature reaches into the void is what it feels like. Because at the outer edges, you have darkness. Is this supposed to be everybody fighting back against the night owl's twilight influence? I'm not 100% sure, but it is definitely interesting artwork. Moving on, we've got Innkeeper's Talent. I told you I love green. I love this. 1 green and 1. At the beginning of combat on your turn, put a +1/+1 counter on target creature you control. Which all by itself is awesome. Just 2 mana for an enchantment that says I'm going to get to beef my guy by 1 counter each turn feels great. But by today's standards, it's not strong enough too, right? So this is one of those level up enchantment classes. I don't like that they put the talent in the name because class is supposed to be what your job is. So this really should just be called Innkeeper, right? The same way that to basically follow along with Barbarian and everything else we saw in the Dungeons and Dragon classes. But whatever, they've chosen for a strange reason to include talent on the name of these. So level 2, you pay a green, permanents you control with counters on them have ward 1, and 1 green and 3. If you'd put 1 or more counters on a permanent or player, put twice that many of each of those kinds of counters on that permanent or player instead. So it is a scaled down doubling season that works somewhat like that, but lets you get +1/+1s and makes it a little bit harder to target your guys. Honestly, like the fact that it only costs 1 green to level it up to level 2, an enchantment that just said, 1 green and 2 to cast at the beginning of your combat, put a +1/+1 on your guy, and your permanents with counters on them have ward 1 would already be really solid. Adding on that extra level where once you've spent 7 mana in total, now it's doubling counters. Every turn you're going to be putting 2 +1/+1s on a guy. Plus, this isn't legendary. You can have multiple of these out. I will absolutely put this in my gigantic 250 card green tower. I love it. And the artwork is so goofy. You got a little mole man who's like, "Hello, traveler, come on over to my inn. You'll be safe here." How will I be safe, bro? You don't even have walls. You don't even have walls. I don't know. I love it. He's just so goofy. He's so goofy. How does this make people into such beefy boys? Like, what is he feeding them? What is in the stew at this inn, right? Then we've got Overprotect. This is the only uncommon that's going to make it in today's video because all the other commons and uncommons I'll be talking about over, and I think there might even be there are actually some rares too that aren't in this video that I'll be covering in a live stream over on my live stream channel later today because I'm trying to keep up with all these bloomburrow spoilers and ended up getting sick, which left me behind. But Overprotect is powerful enough that it makes it into this Wizards has lost their minds video. Legitimately, I was telling somebody about this card yesterday from the olden days. He knows Giant Growth. Actually, let me tell you the card first. So, 1 green and 1 for Overprotect. It's an instant. Target creature you control gets +3/+3 and gains trample, hexproof, and indestructible until end of turn. Flavor text says, Blor's defenses are impervious. And that's Blor the Impervious. That is funny. He doesn't look impervious. It looks like you could just walk up and poke him in the eye. Like, yeah, there's a dome of protection, but it's hovering up pretty high. So I feel like if you just threw a rock into his eye, you'd be like, oh, I'm not as impervious as I thought I was. But whatever, right? I'm not sure what this artwork was originally supposed to represent. I don't feel like it was supposed to represent being impervious, but bro, the power level on this is insane. Like I said, I was talking to somebody yesterday and he played back in the early days. I'm like, yo, you remember Giant Growth? An instant, 1 green, target creature gets +3/+3. He's like, oh yeah, I remember that. And I was like, told him what this card does for 1 more mana. And he's just shaking his head going, what? And it's like, hexproof, bigger, trample. Oh, by the way, indestructible as well. Like, this is wild. And again, love green. This will absolutely make it into my green tower. After that, we've got Season of Gathering. Keep with the green goodness. 2 green and 4 for the Paw Print Season card, where you get to spend 5 Paw Prints. So, for 1, you can put a +1/+1 counter on a creature you control. It gets Vigilance and Trample until end of turn. So you could use this to target 5 of your guys, put +1/+1 counters on them, and Vigilance and Trample for a big swing that you're going to have your guys ready to defend as well. That's awesome. 2 Paw Prints. Choose Artifact or Enchantment. Destroy all permanents of the chosen type. So you can choose that twice and get rid of all artifacts and enchantments if you want to. And 3 Paw Prints. Draw cards equal to the greatest power among creatures you control. I love it. I love the fact that you can use the first ability with the third ability to make your biggest guy even bigger and draw a mitt full of cards. Like, bro, yes, I will absolutely use this card too. And the artwork is fun as well. Pretty straightforward. Some of the seasons, we can't tell what's going on. This is straight up everybody's gathering together to go to battle. You can see the different creature types: raccoons, mice, squirrels, and toads. And that's it, right? Frogs. I wonder if this artwork was originally going to be for something that cared about 4 creature types, but they switched it over, right? There is one piece of artwork that I've seen so far from the spoilers that really does feel like reused art. We'll talk about that when we get to it. All right, so Balin the Haymaker. This card is nuts. 1 white, 1 green, 1 red. 4/3 Rabbit Warrior. And it's funny to me to see beefy Rabbit Warriors when you know what their rite of passage is. If you check out the Planeswalker's Guide to Bloomburrow, like, every race has these epic coming of age trials that people have to go through, except for the rabbit folk. Basically what they do is they have to go on a walk through flowers. I'm not even joking. Other ones have to go and deal with life-threatening situations, and these guys are just tiptoeing through the tulips. So seeing a beefy rabbit is hilarious. So tap 2 untap tokens you control, add a mana of any color. Tap 3 untap tokens you control, draw a card. Tap 4 untap tokens you control, put 3 +1/+1 counters on Balin, and he gets trample until end of turn. Tokens are so easy to make now. Everything barfs tokens out in Magic. This is insane for 3 mana. A 4/3 that you don't even have to sacrifice your tokens. You can get mana with them, you can draw cards with them, and you can make this guy into a beefcake house with trample. And it's counters too. It's not even +3/+3 till end of turn. Wizards really has lost their mind. Also, Balin looks awesome. Charging forth into battle with this scythe that's glowing with some kind of fire magic. I would like to know what that is. It almost looks like a carrot stuck to the end. Is that an enchanted carrot? Look at the little tip of it. It looks like a withered carrot stem almost. And you can see there's some bunnies behind him going, "Let's do it, Balin! Give him the haymaker." Well, isn't a haymaker just like a gigantic like uppercut or big beefy swing with your fist? Can you really call it a haymaker if you're using like a scythe? Oh, that's a minor quibble. Moving on. We've got Helga Skittish Seer, a blue, a white, and a green for a 1/3. Whenever you cast a creature spell with mana 4 or greater, you draw a card, gain a life, and put a +1/+1 counter on her. Tap, add X mana of any one color, where X is her power. Spend this mana only to cast creature spells with mana value 4 or greater, or creature spells with X in their mana cost. This is not what I predicted Helga would be. I thought she would have some kind of scry ability because she literally like can see what's going on in the future. She has visions. None of this feels at all like the character from the story. There's a massive disconnect. Clearly, Wizards of the Coast is trying to improve on the cards they've made in the past, where you have creatures that give you mana to cast X spells, but they don't matter enough. So now she's included like creature cards that cost 4 or more. And it's nutty that you draw a card, gain a life, and put a +1/+1 counter on her every time you cast a 4-cost creature, and that she can basically crank the amount of mana you have for it, right? Like, this is absolutely a nutty mythic. And Helga is, like, she's a fun character in the story, and I love the frog's elemental manipulation of water. It's really satisfying. This artwork is fantastic. After that, we've got the infamous Cruel Claw, infamously busted. 1 red, 1 black, and 1 for a 3/3 legendary weasel mercenary. He's got menace. Whenever the infamous Cruel Claw deals combat damage to a player, exile cards from the top of your library into exile a non-land card. You may cast that card by discarding a card rather than paying its mana cost. Oh, look at me! I can just pitch a card from my hand to play something I got off my deck for free. Am I staring at lands? Oh well, pitch them, play free spells. On top of this dude straight up having menace, so he's harder to block. I really do wish that they gave him like Death Touch because he's got that poisoned blade, but ultimately, I suppose if he's just waving away around a blade that has poison on it, it is going to make him menacing. It's like, yo, I don't want any of that on me. That poison actually etches shields and stuff like that. Cruel Claw shows up as a villain in the story. I wish that he had a like more prominent role. Wizards kind of rushed the bloomburrow story in one way where it should have been like we get to fight Cruel Claw's underlings, we get to fight Cruel Claw, then we get to fight the big bad. But instead, we basically fight Cruel Claw and the big bad at the same time in the story, which isn't as satisfying a rollout. But either way, Cruel Claw looks great. The artwork is amazing. His ability is ridiculous. This is absolutely a fantastic card. And Wizards, they literally lost their mind. Look at this for 3 mana. This is just completely out of control. Moving on. We've got Ren the Rentless. I can't pay my rent, guys. I'm living out in the sticks on a pile of wood. Okay, so Ren the Relentless is 1 black, 1 blue, and 2 for a 3/4 with Ward 2. If a creature an opponent controls would die, exile it instead. At the beginning of each end step, create X/1/1 black rat creature tokens with this creature gets +1/+1 for each other rat you control, where X is the number of creatures your opponent controlled that were exiled this turn. This thing is nuts, man. It just cranks out a whole bunch of rats that all get +1/+1 bonuses for other rats. Like, it's so wild. And I really like the choice to keep the artwork mostly shadowy and dark, where he's standing there with this big, brutal-looking cleaver on a pile of spiky wood, and he's just got some purple magic glowing up in his hand there. Like, he looks quite capable. He's using his like necromantic ability on your opponent's creatures to basically bring them back to life as rat underlings. That's pretty wild. Then we've got Season of the Burrow. 2 white and 3. This is another 5 motor. 1 paw, create a 1/1 white rabbit. 2 paw, exile target non-land permanent. 3 paws, return target permanent with mana value 3 or less from your graveyard to the battlefield with an indestructible counter on it. So you can res guys, you can remove creatures, even your own. You could make your own dudes and get rid of them. Like well, I mean, you can't make the 1/1s with this and target it with the second ability. You have to have other creatures already out. But you can use this to draw if you need to. You can use this to just make 5 1/1 rabbits if you want, like a whole load of tokens. You can use it to res one of your dudes. Overall, very solid. And the weird side effect of me being sick and having looked at these cards but not been able to do a spoiler video is the fact that I feel like I might have talked about something like this before, but I don't know, man. Either way, take a look at this artwork. You see a Calamity Beast's maw coming down over these small animals looking up, and it's like, are we safe in here? I hope its mouth can't get any lower, bro. Moving on. This is the most epic artwork that we're going to look at today. Oh, do I love this so much. Dawn's Truce. 1 white and 1 instant, gift a card. You and permanents you control gain hexproof until end of turn. If the gift was promised, permanents you control also gain indestructible until end of turn. So if you're willing to let your opponent draw a card, you can straight up go, yo, my stuff is indestructible. The flavored text says, I have a child I want to return to as well, whispered Mabel. And there she is, giving the night owl back its twilight egg. And man, is the artwork so awesome. This is basically like up in Fountainport. This is a little outcropping from Glarb's throne room, right? So Mabel picks up this crazy heavy egg and brings it over to the expectant twilight owl. I love the way that the wings are curled up. It basically like makes you focus in on Mabel with the twilight egg. The way the owl is looking in, like this is absolutely gorgeous artwork. I wish that all Magic artwork could be on this level. It genuinely makes you feel, and it shows the scale of Mabel, who's actually a 3/3, by the way, and the Night Owl, who's this gigantic hulking 6/5. Like, oh, this is awesome. And the Twilight Egg looks really cool. It almost looks like a Void Stone, right? It looks like a magic jewel. This is really epic. After that, we've got Whiskervale Forerunner. 1 white and 3. 3/4 Valiant. Whenever he becomes the target of a spell or ability you control for the first time each turn, look at the top 5 cards of your library. You may reveal a creature card with mana value 3 or less from among them. You may put it onto the battlefield if it's your turn. If you don't put it onto the battlefield, put it into your hand, and the rest go on the bottom of your deck in a random order. Like, for real, this would have been a mythic just a couple of years ago. But the power level has gone so insane in Magic that now this is just rare level. It's like, man, is this even good enough, right? Are you going to run it even with the advantage of digging 5 deep? I don't know, man. It's crazy. But it's got the epic vibe. You can clearly see how it draws other creatures out. It's literally up on the hill, Ricola, and people come charging. Let's do it, buddy. All right, next up, we got Dark Star Augur. 1 black and 2 for a 2/3 flyer with offspring of 1 black. You only have to pay 1 black to make a 1/1 copy of this guy. So, at the beginning of your upkeep, reveal the top card of your library, put that card into your hand, you lose life equal to its mana value. So this is essentially a flying dark confidant that for 1 black mana can copy itself, so you have 2 of them. How crazy is that? And it actually makes sense why the offspring is so cheap on this, because you take a big risk by having 2 of these out. You could lose a ton of life in 1 turn, right? You could hand the game over to your opponent if your deck isn't full of really cheap costs. So, the artwork on this is absolutely amazing, right? You've got the augur here flowing up, framed by the moon, wielding an absolutely wicked looking scythe. Honestly, I didn't realize that bloomburrow had so many epic pieces of weaponry. I knew Cragflame existed, but I thought that was pretty much the only like truly magical gear that was kicking around. But apparently There's a bunch. This is awesome. I really like the symmetry as well of the one wing that's coming out here, along with the trailing garments that are curving up in the wind to create that sort of, well, like I said, symmetry. Looks great. Moving on. We've got Hired Claw, looking like a gremlin. Yeah. 1 red for a 1/2. Whenever you attack with 1 or more lizards, Hired Claw deals 1 damage to target opponent. 1 red and 1, put a +1/+1 counter on him. Activate only if an opponent lost life this turn, and only once each turn. So, when you swing with this guy, your opponent takes a damage, which counts as life loss, which means you can activate that ability. It's not at sorcery speed. You can activate that ability right away before blockers are declared or anything like that, so you can beef him up. I mean, Red Rush keeps getting crazier and crazier stuff. I do really love this artwork. It also makes me think of Jurassic Park when Buddy's like, oh, look at you, cute little buddy, and then it goes, and spits in his face, right? So that's fun. Moving on. We've got Starfall Invocation. Here's the one I was talking about where the artwork feels like it's used from something else. So, 2 white and 3 for a sorcery that says, gift a card. Destroy all creatures. If the gift was promised, return a creature card put into your graveyard this way to the battlefield under your control. So you can literally Wrath and then res one of your own guys if you're willing to let your opponent draw a card, which can totally be worth it under particular circumstances. Nothing lurks in the purity of the moon's light. This artwork really feels to me like it was meant to be in an Innistrad set or something like that, because you've got multiple of these wolves, right? And wolves, like all the bigger predator style creatures in this set are all calamity beasts, and calamity beasts are all singular loners. So having 3 wolves that would be calamity beasts all together doesn't make any sense at all. It feels like they just painted in a bat and altered the background by putting like this little hut here or whatever, but that this was originally supposed to be for like an Innistrad set or something along those lines. There's very few uses of slush art, which is artwork Wizards had already kicking around but never actually got to use. And so it doesn't really bother me that much, but this card does stand out with what I know about bloomburrow, right? Pretty solid Wrath though. Moving on, we've got Valley Flood Caller. Everybody's going surfing. 1 blue and 2. Ottertown, USA. All right, 2/2 flash. You may cast non-creature spells as though they had flash. Whenever you cast a non-creature spell, birds, frogs, otters, and rats you control get +1/+1 until end of turn. Untap them. So he brings dudes into play at flash speed by summoning up giant waves, and people come riding in on lily pads. This is honestly goofy. It's goofy, but it's not too bad as like a tribal lord style creature. The flavor is definitely goofbag, but there's some room for some goofbag fun. Let's be real. Bloomburrow is quaint, and I very much love it. Moving on. We got Wishing Well. Man, when I see cards like this, I think about the early days of Magic and how far we've come with crazy power insanity, right? Like, this feels insane to me, but it might be too slow to even matter. This is another reason I feel that Magic's lost its mind. 1 blue and 3 artifact. Tap it, put a coin counter on it. When you do, you may cast target instant or sorcery with mana value equal to the number of coin counters on Wishing Well from your graveyard without paying its mana cost. If that spell be put into your graveyard, exile it instead. Activate only as a sorcery. And you can just tap it and cast an instant or sorcery from your graveyard every single turn if everything lines up right and you have the proper casting costs, right? The artwork is really funky to me. This is a bizarre setup for a Wishing Well, right? It's got that kind of spiral. It makes me think of actually those things at the mall for charities where you drop in a coin and it spirals. It's like, so you can give it to your kid. Here you go, Billy. Go help the diabetes people by putting this toonie in there. Toonie's a $2 coin if you're not Canadian, by the way. All right. So it's a cool concept for a Wishing Well. It's like, what does it lead to? It's clearly mystical and magical. You put a coin in there and it actually grants your wishes. And you can see all these different guys have gotten together to see what old Froggy's going to wish for today. I like this card. Feels bonkers to me. Then we've got Wick, the World Mind. This is the Snail Rat Lord. 1 black and 3 for a 2/4. Whenever Wick or another rat you control enters, create a 1/1 black snail creature token. I just realized people are probably going to get altars of this with John Wick on it. Okay, so whenever here another rat you control enters, create a 1/1 black snail creature token if you don't control a snail. Otherwise, put a +1/+1 counter on a snail you control. And then for a red, a black, and a blue, sack a snail. Wick deals damage equal to the sacked creature's power to each opponent, then draw cards equal to its power. Like, what? You can make little donk snails and keep sacrificing them to do one, right? Or you can just go, yo, I'm going to let this one grow up big and beefy and then whip it at you. And I do like the fact that he's got the little snails around him. You can see the magic flowing around him. But you can also see that he let a snail grow gigantic so he could like live in it as a snail house. It's so bizarre to see a rat with a gigantic snail casing on its back, right? Like, I live in this shell, man. I always wanted to be a Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle. This is the closest I can get. Don't call me Splinter. This is fun. You can just use it on its own, or if you actually like playing snails, you can literally use this with other snails, because there are some crazy ones like Toxrill out there, right? Moving on. We've got Byway Barterer. 1 red and 2 for a 3/3 raccoon rogue with menace. Whenever you expend 4, you can discard your hand. If you do, draw 2 cards. Flavor text says, this trinket has saved my hide more times than I can count. I couldn't possibly let it go for less than, say, 4 acorns. And it's like, okay, so acorns are your currency? Money literally grows on trees in bloomburrow. It seems like, I love the whole, like, I love this thing. I could never let it go. Unless you give me $4, buddy. But the way that he's leaning, the look on his face says that he definitely wants your acorns in his mouth, right? It's, there's a vibe to it. Moving on. We've got, oh, that's it. Okay, we made it through. So if you're somebody who managed to stick with me through the entire spoilers, let me know what your favorite card was down in the comments, all right? And I'm going to be covering a ton more spoilers because I couldn't fit them all into this video or we'd be here for an hour or more, right? Maybe next time. So I'll be covering all those in a live stream over on my live stream archive channel later today. So come on by and hang out with me. Or if you can't come in time to actually be a part of the live stream, it'll be up afterwards so you can still enjoy seeing all of the spoiler cards. Thanks for coming by, my friends. Big shout out to my patrons, and I will see you guys next time.